as promised, your emergency fund video. There are a lot of different ways to calculate an emergency, and therefore there's a lot of different ways to calculate an emergency fund. Ideally, you want it to cover any emergency, no matter how big or how small. In order to do that, I've found that the easiest thing to do is simply come up with exactly what 6 months of expenses would cost you. So, in order to build an effective emergency fund, you first have to go back and make sure your budget's right. Now, you can't just use 6 months of your income because some of your income is going to go into savings. And when you're living in a state of emergency, you're probably not saving. Don't get me wrong, I realize I told you guys to always pay yourself first. But in the state of an emergency, all bets are off. 6 months of an emergency typically covers pretty much everything that you can think of, from the hot water heater if you haven't saved up enough, to the furnace, again if you haven't saved up enough. Maybe your car unexpectedly crapped out and you have to buy a new one and you don't have a down payment. That would be an emergency. A recent emergency that I can think of that none of us saw coming was COVID. Think about all those people who thought for sure they wouldn't get laid off, and even if they did, they'd find another job pretty easy. Fast food workers are a fantastic example. Typically, if you leave a fast food restaurant, another fast food restaurant is probably going to hire you. Now, during COVID, they were all shut down and no one was making anything. There are a lot of people that tell you only need $1,000 saved up for an emergency. If you were laid off for a couple months, would $1,000 cover it? Wouldn't for me. And that's why I try to teach you guys to think bigger, think bolder. We're not just trying to cover a small inconvenience, we're trying to cover a true emergency. It's in the name. Don't get discouraged though. Emergency funds take a while to build. For a lot of people, it's several years. Just plug away a little bit at a time and you'll get there. In the comments, put how close you are to your emergency goal. No dollar figures, just 80%, 50%, just starting out. Give us an idea so we can all help support one another and keep each other accountable. And last but not least, if you don't already, follow me for more budgeting tips.